The Honorable Chris Alexander, Minister of Canadian Citizenship and Immigration, will now deliver his greetings on behalf of the Canadian government.
Thanks very much for the chance to be here, ladies and gentlemen, fellow parliamentarians, members of the Consular Corps, and above all, community leaders. It is an honor to be here on this ground, in this park, with you on this day, to celebrate one of the darkest moments, perhaps the darkest day in the history of the 20th century, and certainly one of the days most redolent of tragedy, of cynical arrogance, and all of which pointed the way to violence on a scale that the world certainly had never known before that time, before the World War II began in 1939. And it's difficult for, not for us here, but for 35 million Canadians across the country with our privileged way of life, with our achievement of rule of law in so many spheres, to grasp just how horrific a turning point the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact represented on August the 23rd. Certainly this country is no stranger to hardship and to struggle itself. I think many of you will remember, certainly Peggy remembers because it's in her writing, that when the Americans came to occupy and burn this city 200 years ago, they came ashore. Peggy was not there, but I think it was in your writing, Peggy. It was only a couple of 100 meters from here where they landed. And we had to fight, and we had to come together to save this country and to build this country. And that is why we have been willing, on every occasion, when international peace was threatened in a systematic way, to send our sons and daughters to the far reaches of this planet to fight and to uphold what was right. And we did that in world wars, we did that as peacekeepers, we did it in conflicts on the Korean Peninsula, we have done it more recently in Afghanistan, and that is why we are all standing together under the leadership of Prime Minister Stephen Harper to point to the illegal occupation of Ukraine, including Crimea, which, as Paul says, has just escalated in the last 24 hours. There are regular Russian military units operating with impunity on the territory of eastern Ukraine, artillery, munitions being delivered, to literally challenge the sovereignty, challenge the self-determination, challenge the democratic choice of a major European country. And that is happening on August 23rd, 2014, ladies and gentlemen. And so we are here as Canadians to continue a very proud tradition. I'm proud to be here in Budapest Park as your Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. This monument, unveiled 10 years after that immigration began, after the Hungarian Revolution, testifies to the great generosity of this country, the huge contribution of Hungarians. I'm not sure how many of you realize the interim federal health program that we debate in Parliament, which we still give to all refugees who come to this country, was actually founded by the Government of Canada after Hungarians started to come after 1956. We have responded systematically, continuously, to hardship, to conflict around the world by opening our doors. But what was our response to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact? A few weeks later, Canada was at war. The first declaration of war by the and only declaration of war by the Canadian Parliament in our country's history And we did that because Poland had been invaded, because the sovereignty, the existence of almost a dozen countries, territory that now comprises a dozen countries, was violated, was destroyed. And we went on to fight for the liberation of Europe in Italy, land on Juno Beach on D-Day, along with our British, American, Polish, French, and other allies, and to try to build a better, more predictable, more secure world through the United Nations, through collective security, through the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Thank goodness, ladies and gentlemen, that almost all of the flags of countries represented here represent NATO members today. That is our strength. That is our commitment to one another. I'm looking over at my friend and colleague Cornelio Chizu, who is here now, who served with me in Afghanistan. But he in uniform, in the first NATO mission that involved combat on a large scale, that involved infantry forces facing great evil, in this case the Taliban. And that mission was a NATO mission because Canada wanted it to be so. And the first troops to face combat under the NATO flag in southern Afghanistan were Canadian troops, ladies and gentlemen, led by a Canadian general. That is our tradition. We lead from the front. We stand on principle. We speak the facts as they are. And Paul, I think everyone here joins me in expressing the hope on this 75th anniversary of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact that we will live to see soon a proud Republic of Ukraine as a member of NATO. Slava Ukraini. In the meantime, we have our work cut out for us, ladies and gentlemen. This commemoration is a sad day. We recall tens of millions of lives lost. We recall at least 50 years of history that was miserable and black for much of Europe. We recall wounds that have yet to heal. I lived in Moscow for 6 years as a Canadian diplomat. I've seen the buildings where this diabolical pact was signed. I've heard the confusion, the moral confusion that even ordinary Russians have because they haven't been told the truth about their own history, about their own leaders' grave mistakes. And yes, you're all right that this confusion persists in far too many parts of Europe and the world today. We have a role to play in showing that there can be clarity, in being that voice of clarity. And that is why I know you are all so proud to be supporters of the Tribute to Liberty, to be supporters of the monument that will proudly stand in Ottawa for all time to the victims of Canada, to Canada as a land of refuge, to the victims of communism, excuse me, in Canada, on behalf of Canada. And they are victims of communism who came to Canada in their millions and who have stayed here to build this country with us in fundamental ways. We remember the Holocaust. We remember all the history since 1989, since Europe began to regain its freedom and its unity. That work continues. And by being here, all of us here together today, we show that the power of the human spirit to do those things is undiminished, and that Canada will play a central role in the next steps of this story. Thank you very much. And I have brought, we have brought the three members of Parliament from the government side, the Prime Minister's message. I'm wondering if Ted Opitz could be permitted just to summarize that for the audience. It's not very long.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, friends in freedom, peace, and security. Prime Minister says to you today, Black Ribbon Day is a time to mourn the victims of communism and National Socialism in Europe, and to honor those who lost their lives under these evil regimes. Today we also pay tribute to the courageous men and women who fought back against oppression and tyranny. Black Ribbon Day marks the anniversary of the infamous 1939 Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, which directly led to the occupation of most of Central and Eastern Europe and the senseless slaughter and the oppression of millions. As we mark Black Ribbon Day, we should remember that men, women, and children in many parts of the world continue to face violence and repression from totalitarian regimes and dehumanizing ideologies. Canada strongly denounces such actions as they deny the intrinsic dignity and worth of every person, which is the foundation of a free and a just society. Our government is committed to honoring and remembering the victims of communism and Nazism. That is why we are helping to create a monument in our nation's capital that will honor the hundreds of millions of men, women, and children who struggled against the tyranny of communism. It is also why we are building a national Holocaust monument in the National Capital Region that will preserve the memory of the Holocaust and its victims. On this important day, I encourage all Canadians to join our government's efforts to promote and to protect the values of freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law around the world, and to do what we can to ensure that the wrongs committed during the darkest chapters of human history are not repeated. Signed by the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada. Thank you.